I signed the closing papers while my brother was busy picking out leather sofas with my parents' money. When my mother handed him a cashier's check for $60,000 to cover his down payment, she turned to me with a dismissive shrug and said, "You're resilient, honey, just go rent somewhere cheap." My brother snickered, assuming I'd be paying off someone else's mortgage for the next decade while he lived in a pristine suburban home. What none of them realized was that while they were busy celebrating his handouts, I had been quietly building something of my own. 3 weeks later, when my parents realized exactly what property I bought, and who now held total legal control over the place they called home, the laughter completely stopped. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Clara, and at 27 years old, I had spent my entire life playing the role of the reliable, quiet daughter. The one who worked through college, paid her own rent, and never asked for a dime. My younger brother, Julian, on the other hand, was the family prince. Every time he stumbled, whether it was a maxed-out credit card or a failed business venture, my parents were right there with a safety net and a stack of cash. I thought I was immune to the sting of their blatant favoritism until the evening of my mother's Sunday dinner. The moment we sat down, my parents set a bottle of expensive champagne on the table. Before I could even ask what we were celebrating, my mother handed Julian a crisp, white envelope containing a cashier's check for $60,000 to put toward the down payment on a stunning 4-bedroom suburban home. Julian smirked, leaning back in his chair like a king accepting a crown. I sat there frozen. I had been saving for years to purchase a modest townhome of my own, sacrificing every luxury to build a solid foundation. Quietly, I swallowed my pride and asked my parents if they might be willing to match even a fraction of that amount to help me secure my own place. My father didn't even look up from his steak. My mother just let out a dry, dismissive sigh, looking at me with mild annoyance. "Clara, don't be greedy," she said flatly. "Julian is starting a family soon and needs a proper home. You're resilient, honey. Just go rent somewhere cheap." Hearing my own mother tell me to just go rent somewhere cheap, while handing my brother a small fortune felt like a cold bucket of water over my head. But instead of crying or causing a scene, I simply took a slow sip of my water, nodded, and let a calm, polite smile wash over my face. Played along completely. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'll start looking for an apartment tomorrow." They all let out a collective sigh of relief, clearly thrilled that I wasn't going to make a fuss or ruin Julian's big night. Julian even offered a fake, condescending pat on my shoulder, telling me he'd let me crash on his couch if I ever needed a place to stay. What they didn't know, what nobody in my family had a clue about, was that I wasn't broke. While Julian had spent his 20s leasing sports cars, taking luxury vacations, and running to our parents every time his bank account hit zero, I had been working 60 hours a week. I took on freelance consulting gigs on nights and weekends, lived below my means, and spent 5 years building immaculate credit alongside a massive savings account. I didn't need their $60,000. I just wanted to see if they loved us equally. Now that I had my answer, the gloves were off. That very night, instead of browsing rental listings, I opened up commercial real estate listings and found an overlooked, distressed multi-unit property in an up-and-coming neighborhood, and I was cash-ready to make a move. The property I found wasn't a glossy suburban house like Julian's. It was a character-rich, historic multi-unit building sitting on a sprawling corner lot. The owner was an elderly gentleman looking to liquidate quickly, and because it needed some cosmetic updates, most buyers had walked away. But I saw raw potential. I made a competitive cash-backed offer, secured a smart investment mortgage, and within 2 weeks, the deal was officially closed. The entire property belonged to me. However, the real secret wasn't just the 3 rental apartments inside the main building. It was the plot of land attached to the back of the lot. During my title search and survey, I uncovered something that made my jaw drop. The adjacent parcel, a gated, paved lot right behind my new property, happened to contain the exact private access road, loading dock, and primary parking infrastructure for a local woodworking and distribution company. That company was owned and operated by my father. For the last 15 years, My father's business had been using that private lot under an informal handshake agreement with the previous owner. The old owner had never bothered to formally lease it or enforce strict property boundaries, allowing my dad to park his delivery vans and unload inventory completely free of charge. But legally, that land wasn't grandfathered in, and it certainly didn't belong to the city. It was part of the deed I had just signed. Without that lot, my father's delivery trucks couldn't load their daily shipments, and his employees would have nowhere to park. He had spent decades taking his business operations for granted, never realizing that the ground beneath his entire livelihood was vulnerable. And now, his quiet, resilient daughter, the one he told to go rent somewhere cheap, was his official landlord. 3 weeks after I closed on the property, Julian threw a lavish housewarming party to show off the suburban home my parents had essentially bought for him. The place was filled with catered food, expensive wine, and a house full of guests admiring his brand new furniture. My parents were glowing with pride, strutting around the living room as if they had just won a Parent of the Year award. I arrived intentionally late, dressed casually, and stayed near the back of the room. It didn't take long for my mother to corner me near the kitchen island, right in front of a group of her closest friends. "Look who made it," she announced with a theatrical sigh, wrapping an arm around Julian's shoulders. "We were starting to think you were embarrassed to come. Have you found a little basement apartment to rent yet, Clara? Or are you still rooming with friends?" Julian chuckled, taking a slow sip of his drink. "Hey, leave her alone, Mom. Renting builds character, right? Not everyone gets to own a piece of real estate in their 20s. The surrounding guests offered polite, pitying smiles. I let the silence stretch for a moment, letting them soak in their brief moment of superiority. Then I took out my phone, pulled up a digital copy of my property deed, and laid it face up on the marble kitchen island. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm and smooth, "I didn't rent. I bought." My father squinted at the screen, picking up the phone with a frown. "What is this? A condo?" "No," I replied, looking him dead in the eye. "It's a multi-unit property on 5th and Elm. 3 residential apartments, plus the commercial lot directly behind it." My mother laughed, but it sounded thin, uncertain. My father's eyes suddenly widened as he read the legal description of the lot boundaries, and all the color drained straight out of his face. "5th and Elm," my father muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. He stumbled backward slightly, almost knocking over his wine glass. "Clara, that parcel behind the main building, that's my loading zone. That's where my delivery trucks turn around every single day." "I know," I said pleasantly, taking a small bite from a cheese platter. "And as of 3 days ago, the property transfer is fully recorded with the county. I am your new landlord." My mother's condescending smile evaporated instantly. "What are you talking about? Your father has used that lot for 15 years. That belongs to his business." "It never belonged to his business," I corrected her firmly. "The previous owner let him use it on a handshake deal because he was old and didn't care. But I care. And considering the property taxes and insurance on that lot are now my responsibility, the free ride is officially over." Julian stepped forward, his face red with anger. "Are you serious right now? You're trying to extort Dad on the night of my housewarming party. You're just jealous because they helped me buy this house." "I'm not jealous, Julian," I said, looking him up and down. "You needed a $60,000 handout to buy a roof over your head. I bought a commercial asset with my own hard work. There's a big difference." My father grabbed my arm, his tone suddenly desperate. "Clara, please. You don't understand. If I can't use that lot, my distribution stops. I'll get fined by the city if my trucks park on the main street. You have to sign that lot over to the family business, or at least give us an exclusive, free easement. Sign it over." I laughed, shaking my head. "Just 3 weeks ago, you told me I wasn't worth helping and to go rent somewhere cheap. Now you want me to give you prime commercial land for free. That's not how business works, Dad. If you want access to my property, you're going to have to sign a formal commercial lease. at full market rate. The housewarming party completely disintegrated into chaos. Guests awkwardly scattered toward the front door, leaving my family standing in the kitchen, staring at me in absolute disbelief. My mother tried every trick in her emotional playbook. First came the tears, then the guilt-tripping. "We're your parents, Clara. How could you do something so vindictive to your own family? After everything we did raising you. What you did was make it clear that Julian was your priority and I was an afterthought," I replied smoothly. "You handed him $60,000 on a silver platter and dismissed me without a second thought. But this isn't personal, it's strictly business. The lease agreement for the commercial lot is $2,000 a month. Take it or move your trucks." Julian stepped up to me, puffing out his chest. "Mom, Dad, don't listen to her. Just buy the lot from her or take her to court. She can't force Dad to pay that." Actually laughed. "Take me to court for what, Julian? Enforcing my own property rights. Good luck with that. And as for buying the lot, the sale price is $300,000 cash. Non-negotiable." My father looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He knew the legal reality. Fighting me in court would cost tens of thousands in legal fees he didn't have, and he'd still lose. Finding a new facility for his business would take months and cost a fortune in relocation fees. Worse yet, my parents had just drained a massive chunk of their savings to give Julian his down payment. To pay my new commercial lease and keep his business afloat, my father was going to have to pull back on the monthly allowance and financial subsidies he had been quietly giving Julian to maintain his luxurious lifestyle. Julian suddenly realized what this meant. Without our parents' ongoing financial support, he couldn't afford the property taxes, insurance, and maintenance on his shiny new 4-bedroom home. His face turned pale as the reality sank in. My victory hadn't just secured my future, it had completely exposed his fragile facade. 2 weeks later, my father signed the commercial lease agreement. The monthly payments from his business now cover more than half of my mortgage, while the rent from the 3 apartments inside my building pays for the rest, plus a healthy profit every single month. Julian's story didn't end quite as smoothly. Without my parents' continuous bailouts, he couldn't handle the upkeep on his massive home. Within 6 months, he was forced to put the house on the market and move into a small, modest 2-bedroom townhome, learning the hard way what real financial responsibility actually feels like. My parents don't talk down to me anymore. When they see me now, there are no dismissive comments or sarcastic remarks about renting. They treat me with a cautious, quiet respect, finally understanding that the daughter they overlooked was the one who held all the power. Walking through my property today, I'm reminded that true success isn't about handouts or showing off. It's about resilience, quiet strategy, and building a foundation so strong that nobody can ever tell you where you belong.